If you're a kid, please make note of this. It's for your own good.
General Kenobi!
I have loved Star Wars for a very long time. I got around to watching both the original and prequel trilogies back when I was approximately 7, and I have it to thank for introducing me to several other franchises that were more grand and epic in scale, and it plays a massive part of my love for fiction, movie, TV show, and video game alike. I continue to love the series to this very day, no matter what stupid things may happen behind the scenes or in the fandom. However, as I was growing up, one Star Wars game I was interested in was Star Wars The Force Unleashed. I thought it was cool based on the clips and trailers I saw on the website, but I would not get around to actually playing the Wii version until a few years later at a cousin's house. For about a few seconds. After that, I guess it just flew away from me, only to slowly come back in recent times when I wanted more things to review and celebrate National Star Wars Day in some way. In the end, after some talks, I decided to finally look at this game and see what I was missing out on, and I can see why they did have some faith in this game when it first came out. Nowadays, it's no secret that Star Wars does tell its own little side stories through games or even movies, but back then, it was rare to see them actually create a story that took place within the main saga, yet could stand on its own. Not to mention, the idea of controlling a Sith apprentice who was really with the Force and could use it to bend opposition to his will was something every Star Wars fan wanted back in the day, and the devs at LucasArts seemed to really try to make the best of it, even down to having George Lucas involved. Then it came out and everyone was like, eh? And then I step in to review it. I should clarify that I'm reviewing the HD version off the PS3, as that seems to be one of the more functional versions of the game, and I've heard horror stories about the PC version of the game and its tendency to crash. The Wii and PS2 versions have a ton of differences, so I won't cover it here, but I might just do a smaller video in case I want to analyze differences. Maybe. So then, shall we get started? Very well. To give some quick context, if you want me to tell you where this fits into the Star Wars chronology, Force Unleashed takes place sometime after the events of Episode 3, but before the events of Episode 4, in that Order 66 has been carried out, and the Empire reigns supreme across the galaxy, with Darth Vader as one of its leaders. That's kind of it, because aside from that, the story of Force Unleashed is pretty easy to understand as its own self-contained narrative, which is one of the many things I like about it. You play as Deke Starkiller, the secret apprentice of Darth Vader, who was taken in as his own after Vader murdered his father, a surviving Jedi of Order 66. I say secret because the Emperor does not know of him, so Vader wishes to use that to his advantage so that Starkiller can become strong enough to help him overthrow the Emperor and rule the galaxy. So the beginning of the game is gathering strength by hunting down and killing multiple remaining Jedi. That's just the basics of the story, but things get a lot more complicated later on, with things like Vader's loyalties being tested, Starkiller truly finding a purpose he is meant to fulfill, as well as takes on how certain things in the franchise got their beginnings, like the Rebel Alliance. And even if the story is ultimately not canon, I actually really like the takes in the direction it went for. Honestly, I can kind of see this being its own little Star Wars movie. The writing is on par with some of the films, and there are a lot of set pieces I'm sure many are familiar with. But even if you're not a fan of Star Wars, on its own, this is still a pretty good story about how one person starts as a young warrior and grows into something that's truly made a difference in the universe, which is always welcome to see. Putting this out there now, this is my favorite part of the game, for actually feeling rewarding to reach and interesting to think about. This is where things get a little weird. The cutscenes with the higher budget do overall look really solid for an early 7th gen game. I mean, they don't look incredible, but they do get the job done with solid environments and good animations for the characters. The in-game cutscenes look decent too. I mean, sure, there's some weird facial animations here and there, but for the most part, it's fine. Same goes to the gameplay, as every character animation looks very natural without being too ridiculous. The music is just many tracks ripped straight from the movies, which is cool, although I would have liked more original arrangements because I barely noticed them. However, two things I will immediately commend are the sound design and voice acting. I've got to give credit to Skywalker Sound for using sound effects at just the right times, and they do enhance the game more. And the voice actors all treat their script seriously and give absolutely great performances. Special credit going to Sam Witwer as Starkiller, Nathalie Kops as the pilot Juno Eclipse, and especially Matt Sloan as Darth Vader. He does a great job capturing the presence James Earl Jones had, yet do his own thing simultaneously. And it's actually kind of funny when you listen to his lines here and his lines in the 2015 Battlefront game.
At last, the dark side is your ally. Rise, my apprentice.
The Emperor will show you the true nature of the Force.
9-day difference. However, there's many things in the presentation that aren't so great. In-game, the environments look really muddy. A few of them do look fine, like aboard Imperial bases and Kashyyyk, but then you get to places like Felucia, where everything just blends into one another. Quite a few textures look low quality, the lighting makes every planet look way too similar for my liking, and it makes it hard to tell where to go or what's affected by the Force sometimes. Also, glitches. Yes, there are plenty of glitches. I mean, it's not Sonic 06 or WWE 2K20 levels of broken, but the game isn't too well optimized either. I mean, some don't affect your progress, like some textures absolutely flipping out, and the AI being completely stupid. Yes, indeed! Run, Trooper, you've got so much other space to go. But then there are some where enemy hitboxes randomly turn off, enemy health bars turn off, random objects just suddenly pop in and damage you, and the game will get stuck on loading screens. That last one might be more of a disc problem rather than a problem with the game as a whole. I don't know, I'm still sad that it happened and I'm pointing it out. It's really jarring how many bugs I ran into and forced my playthrough to go longer than it would have otherwise. And in general, there are pretty big oversights for the ones ensuring quality control. So overall, the presentation does have some commendable highs, but some pretty drastic lows. But if you ask me, the lows kind of outweigh the highs for me. Not to ruin the presentation, but I can't ignore them at all. Oh, and there's loading screens in places where they're not needed. Like, why? So the fact that you're a Sith apprentice bending the Force to his will was pushed as the most attractive thing about the game back in its heyday, so the one area that will enhance that is absolutely the gameplay. As the footage might tell, the game is a hack and slash utilizing both your lightsaber and your Force powers. The latter is especially apparent because the developers wanted to go for more of a feel like your lightsaber is an extension of your powers rather than the other way around. Starkiller does start out plenty capable with his default abilities, which are a couple combos, a force push which can be good for staggering, and the ability to grab objects and throw them. Over time, either by defeating bosses or unlocking nodes in the upgrade menu, he can power up these abilities or gain new ones altogether like Force Lightning and Saber Throwing. And all these abilities are for the most part relatively fun to use, and do give you good offensive methods. Although I do have some issues with the grab and throw in particular. This one may seem a bit nitpicky, but I am bothered with some inconsistencies by it. Translation, Starkiller can use the Force on a TIE bomber when the game starts and a Star Destroyer later, but he can't force a Purge Trooper or these rocks that some enemies throw. Weird. But these next two can be legit problems. Because you can throw objects anywhere you please, I would have liked if there was a reticle before the object would be thrown. I counted way too many times where I was trying to throw something at an enemy to help me beat it, only for it to fly towards something I wasn't even focused on, like it was allergic to such design. This really got under my skin when I had to deal with a ton of chunky enemies at once, or this part when I have to drag down a Star Destroyer. Really now, Starkiller? You're gonna throw your ammunition at that tower and have it do nothing? You really are a deek. And the third thing that bugs me is sometimes the button grabs just wouldn't work. Yeah, for some reason there were times where I tried to grab some things and Starkiller just stood there looking like he fell asleep standing up. Even when my force meter was just fine. That's another thing! You have a force meter that limits how much you can use your powers, and after waiting for a few seconds, it recharges when you're not using it. Here's the thing, the game puts so much emphasis on the force that it feels like your meter drains really quickly. Throughout my entire playthrough, I never felt like the amount of this meter gives me was enough, even after upgrading it. A ton of combat options you do get in the game require some energy from this meter, which further contributes to my point of it draining fast. To circumvent this problem, I ended up using the Sith combos. Basically combos that use the square and triangle button if you're playing the PS3 version. A lot, because they not only hit hard, but the triangle hits can easily stagger foes, which I found useful against enemies that don't flinch that easily. Otherwise I could just run away to find something to help me, because there are few defensive options. Sure, Starkiller auto blocks many of the normal bullets shot at him, but doesn't work against all projectiles, so don't rely on it. He can also guard himself normally using the L2 button, which also lets him access more force abilities, but it does not block everything, you can still take chip damage, and worst of all, you can't move. This would not be an issue if Starkiller had good evasion options, but he doesn't. All he gets is this dash, which honestly kinda sucks. It has a lot of wind-up, you're not invincible when using it, and you cannot chain them together. I'm not asking for it to be broken, but all things considered, I only use this thing because I had to, and a lot of the time, it barely helped me out against anything combat-related. Also, there's poorly done quick-time events. Okay, they're not as bad here as they are in some other games I've played, but I still think they're not done very well, because there's really no satisfying feeling to landing them, and the detection of their triggers can be very questionable. On the other hand, there was no punishment for failing them, which completely removes the point of including them. It just feels really tacked on to some underwhelming abilities, so as an apology for those shortcomings, they fit power-ups into each stage. These are just temporary buffs like healing you, giving you more force energy, upping your attack, or draining enemy health to heal you. These do last for a decent amount of time, but I can't help but feel like they apologize for what Starkiller lacks, as while some are out of your way, others are just in plain sight like they don't even try to hide them. I would have preferred it if these were actually new force powers Starkiller could get, making him more versatile, as aside from these and killing enemies, there was no way to heal Starkiller at all. This may not seem like a big deal, but some enemies feel like they were not designed with this gameplay style, leading to some cheap hits. Not to mention the reward for abiding by the rules of playing well is health, which only means anything if you've suffered a lot of punishment. That seems backwards to me. On that note, let's talk about enemy variety. There's different classes of enemies, those from the Empire, the most common type, some progenitor of the Rebels that show up on one level, so not much to talk about, Rodian soldiers complete with scrap machines, which are neat, and Felucian warriors with their Rancor. For the most part, they're just fine to take on, it's just a matter of using your force powers well. However, there are a good number of them that don't really feel like they were designed with combat in mind, more so just spectacle and finishing them. Namely, ATSTs, which have multiple forms of artillery, get stunned very infrequently unless you use Force Lightning, and have shockwaves with questionable hit detection activated by simply stepping on the ground. Rancors are no better, just replace the artillery with rocks and more busted shockwaves, and there you go. Doesn't help that they are only killed via quicktime events. Purge Troopers have these really annoying shields that block attacks, can grab you out of your combos, and have homing rockets. Purge Troopers in general annoy me the most because there are many sections of the game where they're just thrown at you. In the second half of the game, nearly every Empire enemy encounter has a couple sprinkled in, and they make sections like this one on Kashyyyk and the final level a complete headache. The variety is okay, but the placement of many of them and the arenas they're in really get to me, doubled by the fact that the camera is not very good. There's no lock-on feature, so to speak of, and when you jump to the top of platforms to get to another area, the camera flips out and briefly zooms in ahead of you, disrupting your vision. As a result, it is not uncommon for enemies to land cheap hits on you from off-camera. Boss fights are a really bad offender of this. The camera is usually set up to keep you and the boss in frame. A major drawback to this is that when you're far apart, it is incredibly difficult to discern where you and your opponent are at a given moment, and getting too close isn't ideal because they don't stagger that easily. I know what they were going for, but these battles are more so just cumbersome rather than intriguing, with two exceptions that you fight pretty late into the adventure. Though I will say that one thing they did okay on is the level design. Every planet is pretty much a linear set of challenges, with some secret areas hiding away certain goodies, which I'm overall fine with. The maps don't feel overly spacious, and it is genuinely fun to think outside the box and discover one of many holocrons. These holocrons, more often than not, give you force points and force spheres, which you can use to get new combos, upgrade your powers, or upgrade something else like your health, your force meter, and things like that. But there are a couple that net you something else entirely, like artwork for the game, alternate lightsaber colors, or alternate costumes. I didn't get a ton of them throughout my playthrough, as because a lot of the environments blend into one another, it can be hard to tell where they are. Not to mention the map is useless because it doesn't cover everything, but these do feel legitimately cool to get. But hey, if you don't want that, this game just so happens to have a gaming relic. Cheat codes! Yes, by accessing this on the pause menu, you can literally enter a cheat code to unlock a move earlier than intended, give yourself an advantage in combat, or unlock all lightsaber colors and force powers. But there is a catch to using them. After activating them, the game disables saving, which allows you to factor that into consideration before using them. I mean, sure, there is a workaround, but it's pretty out of your way, and depending on how you play, might be kind of disrupted. An interesting trade-off, I find. I mean, I get why cheat codes are rarely used nowadays, but to be honest, this is one of the coolest ways I've seen them handled in any game. And I'm just going to give credit where credit is due, because for everything I do like about this game, there's always something that really bothers me. I see the game as an overall solid foundation and is well balanced mechanically, but the things that are not designed around it are just more often than not frustrating. There are some legitimately cool moments, but one thing's for sure, the more irritating moments got to me more. Sad to say. I really don't know what to think of this game. I really do enjoy what you can do with the Force and your lightsaber, as well as how you can upgrade it. I really enjoyed the story, the collectibles are cool, and there's plenty of touches that really bring out the Star Wars love in me. I do have fun with this game at times, and there are plenty of things to enjoy here, but the contradictory enemy design that they spam at you as the game goes on, the middling presentation in-game, the unhealthy amount of technical problems, the annoying boss fights, and the tacked-on quicktime events and power-ups make it really hard for me to consider another playthrough. It's a game that I really want to like, but I'm sorry, the problems it had added up and hampered my experience. I enjoyed what I could, and I will give the devs credit for some of the ambition and some of the attention to detail, but it cannot negate the parts that I was annoyed with, and by the end, I didn't really feel like I accomplished much aside from seeing a neat story unfold, and it makes me sad that I had to come to this conclusion. I guess if you wanted to pick it up and see what it's like, that's okay. There's far worse that you could be playing, but there's also far better. So I'd say that the Force isn't all that strong with this one. I'm the Lightning Ripper. May the Force be with you, everyone.